Well, ladies and gentlemen, the 2024 Concacaf Champions Cup draw is finally complete on this Wednesday, December 13th. We thank you very much for joining us on the Canadian Premier League YouTube channel as we learned some incredibly exciting news in the last half hour or so, right, Mitchell? Obviously, we knew how big a tournament this would be for CPL Shield winners, Cavalry FC, and CPL playoff champions, Forge FC, who get to play in this massive tournament against some of the biggest clubs in North America in CONCACAF. If you are just tuning in, haven't seen the news yet, Forge FC are headed to Guadalajara to play Chivas, who are obviously one of the biggest clubs in that country, and Cavalry are bound for a probably similarly sunny February date in Orlando City against that club. Two very interesting opponents. We're going to stick with us. Excuse me. We're going to have both Tommy Wheeldon Jr. from Cavalry, Bobby Smyrniotis from Forge on shortly to get their instant reaction to the draw. But again, just to kick us off here, if you missed the whole show, if you didn't tune in to CONCACAF's production from Miami, I'll run through it very quickly for you. Obviously, we had 5 teams with byes to the round of 16 of this tournament. Unfortunately, we're not there yet with the CPL, so we went in the first round with a number of other teams. Obviously, I'll just run through them very quickly. In round 1, we've got Philadelphia Union from MLS playing Saprissa, Toluca from Liga MX playing another Costa Rican club, Herediano, Club América against Real Esteli, who I believe are Nicaraguan. Mitchell, is that right?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. Obviously, after that, in match number 4, Chivas and Forge, the New England Revolution are taking on Independiente of Panama, who you may remember have played against I believe Forge in the 2021 CONCACAF League. And then on the other side of the bracket, we're going to bring up the graphic once we've been able to track that down. But Houston Dynamo playing St. Louis City, Tigres playing the third Canadian entrant, the Canadian champion from 2023, the Vancouver Whitecaps. We then got Orlando City and Cavalry FC of our own Canadian Premier League. Monterrey playing Comunicaciones from Guatemala. FC Cincinnati playing Jamaican side Cavalier, and finally Nashville SC in that coveted match 11 against Dominican side Mocha, and that's the coveted match 11 because the winner of that game goes on to play Inter Miami, and we all know some of the guys who play for them, namely mostly Kamal Miller, I think is the big name that plays for that club, but they have other guys. They have somebody called Sergio and a guy called Lionel Messi. Speaking of clubs, though, that have a guy called Sergio, let's start with Cavalry's draw because we're going to hear from Tommy very shortly. Mitchell, Orlando City, just give me your instant reaction to what that kind of means to you, what you instantly think when you see that Cavalry have got that draw, and maybe what that kind of, how you think that kind of stacks up for their obviously first foray into continental competitions.
Yeah, I mean, they're all going to be difficult opponents, but Orlando, obviously a team who've had decent measure of success within Major League Soccer, and I think it's a nice draw in terms of one of those clubs that I think will have a lot of eyes on it within North America and within the United States, considering some of the players who have played for them in the past. Obviously Kaká being the most obvious one, and Luis Nani, but even the Canadian connections as well. I mean, you had guys like Kyle Aaron go through there. You mentioned Kamal Miller, Richie Larea, and then right now Luca Petrasso is obviously brothers with York United's own Michael Petrasso. There's the degree of removal of Canadian Premier League that we'll be looking for in each of these draws, but yeah, no, I think it's a solid matchup for them. Obviously, there'll be pretty different climates in the two the two legs of this tie, but I think really good opportunity for Cavalry to go out and play a very good opponent.
Absolutely. Yeah, we love playing 6 degrees of CPL separation in this office, and we do all the time. But to business, obviously Orlando second in the MLS Supporter Shield table this year, just behind Cincinnati. They won the U.S. Open Cup last year, which I believe was their first ever trophy. They've played quite a lot of cup football recently. I mean, they played Columbus just now in the conference semifinals in MLS, lost to them, but they played Tigres in the I think it was this most recent edition of the Concacaf Champions League, as it was then known, in the round of 16, lost to Tigres. But again, a tough game, and I think a lot of people will remember their most recent appearance in the Leagues Cup when they played a pretty intense game against Inter Miami, and obviously Leo Messi scored a brace in a round them out. I think that we can sit here all night and talk about this draw, but I think there's a person that a lot of people, Cavalry fans especially, will want to hear from very shortly. So I think without further ado, Mitchell, you'll be back in a few minutes so we can break down Forge's draw. But I am very, very honored to welcome in our very special guest, Mr. Tommy Wheeldon Jr., head coach of Cavalry FC. Tommy, it's been a little longer than usual since we last spoke to you, since I think the CPL final. I hope you're doing well. But I mean, start us off with the first thing that went through your mind when you saw, Cavalry FC come out of that little ball and find out where you guys are going.
It's brilliant, isn't it? I mean, this is what we're playing the game for, and that's what we're bringing a domestic league to Canada for, to give Canadians an opportunity to thrive against the best, and to pull a club like Orlando City that have set a great precedent for how they've competed year on year out on the pitch. I think it's a great draw. I think it's an attractive opponent. I think they play a good brand, and I think it's going to be a good matchup for us. But I'm excited for our fans who are probably thinking about, right, where are they booking flights away to it? These are experiences you want to give, and to have done this in only 5 years of our operation, to sit there through that door, I thought was brilliant.
Absolutely. Canadians do love a trip to Florida in February. So now I think there's quite the reason for one as well here. Tommy, you've spoken several times over the last few years, but especially this year, about how much of a priority it was for your club to get into this competition. Can you maybe just elaborate a little bit on what it means to see your club logo in that bracket with some of those big clubs, and to be part of this competition and have that opportunity to test yourselves?
It's fairy tale stuff, isn't it? I mean, you think back to what do you do? Like, what do you want your kids to inspire for the next generation? They're on the pitch when they're practicing with their teammates or themselves. They're inspiring themselves against playing, against Messi, with Messi, and to know that we are in the same company as the Ballon d'Or winner is just extraordinary, really. Like I said, 5 years ago, this has been bashed around about a league that's succumbed to a pandemic and been able to survive, and now we're thriving, and to get not just only us but also Forge in there as well, and Vancouver Whitecaps is another Canadian club. There's 3 pathways in. Our names to be accompanied with the other 26 names of high caliber is exceptional. And I mean, I think Concacaf have done a really good job in looking at the competition, saying, how can we make it better? We've been watching the cup competitions going through, and it's been exciting. And recently, Robin Hood just won the Caribbean Cup, and that was an exciting storyline. And now we're in this great company, and we can't wait to have these matchups. It just means we're bringing our preseason back a month earlier. But I think our lads, I think our players, I think our fans, they had such a good year last year. They're excited to be coming back for this.
Yeah, I think a lot of CPL players probably wouldn't say no to a shorter off season, right? Yeah. I guess I'm sure obviously plenty of work has been going on behind the scenes for you guys since that, probably since the day after that CPL final for a lot of you and your staff. But does it maybe ratchet up a little bit now that you know a little bit more about what's up? Obviously, we don't know the schedule yet, and we don't know a lot, but what does the next maybe month and a half look like before early February to get your guys prepared for this? Obviously, one of the biggest challenges this club has faced yet.
Well, after a terrific season that we had, we knew that we would, by being in this competition, we'd have a month extra than everyone else. So we need to make sure that we're deep, because we're going into 4 competitions. We're going against high caliber opposition right off the get-go. Early in the season, when it kicks off around mid-April, that you're going to be facing in the Canadian Championship and another early cup competition. So we know we need depth. I thought we've had terrific, consistency with our play this year. I guess it still is 2023, isn't it? So we've been really consistent, but we want to add on it. We're never just resting on our laurels. We're always looking at ways, whether it's the staff looking at what we can add to improve on our performance on the pitch, to continuity and chemistry. Everyone forgets that's actually, it takes time to teach, and our players have a really good idea of how we want to play both sides of the ball. That will give us an advantage head start to then maybe sampling in a few things. But I'm excited to see how the likes of Marco Carducci and Sergio Camargo have been from day one with us to my Bevan Golden Boot winner to Ali Musi and Dan Klomp to be pitched against some of these players that we're going to be facing against. I mean, that's like I said, fairy tale stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. And this is, I guess, more of the continued evolution of your club, right? We spoke a little bit about, we spoke a little bit about new Cavalry over the season here as you guys went on to win the Shield by 13 points. And this is a new challenge. And a lot of players, that obviously that you see every day, players that I've spoken to have talked about how seeing their logo, seeing some of their faces on these graphics alongside the players in this competition is quite the incentive. But I mean, you have to, it's quite the reward for a lot of these guys for the hard work that they put in over the last, not just year, but for some of them 5 years, right?
It is. And I think we can't downplay the achievement of what these players have done. They've gone coast to coast in one of the largest leagues in the world in terms of miles that you're going to have to do. And we're all looking at, the way the season was, and it was probably the most competitive until the end, where we finished very, very strong and kept consistent. So I think what they've done is the players have earned this for the club. The fans have stuck with us through everything from, like I said, the pandemic to, an average 2022 year, but we're always in the conversation. And I think that's what this club is about. It's a competitive club. Now we get the chance to raise the bar playing against an American MLS club, something we've not yet faced. So we want to make sure, how do we measure up against an Orlando? How do we measure up in the heat there when we've only had a 5 to 6 week season? Does that change our tactics to how they would measure up in the cold up in Calgary? So, these are the things that we've got to navigate our way through and bring into how we prepare the guys over the next 5 to 6 weeks leading into these games.
Absolutely. I mean, you guys will be continue to be trailblazers as the first CPL club to play an American MLS team, which is it's something a little bit interesting and a little bit different from playing those 3 Canadian ones in the Canadian Championship. Tommy, it's always a pleasure, obviously, to speak with you. Congratulations again on winning that regular season title and getting into this competition. And I'm sure we will. You'll be very busy anyway, and we'll still be asking for plenty of stuff over the next month and a half. But for now, I think we'll let you get back and hopefully enjoy at least a little bit of rest and peace over the holiday period before we bug you again. Tommy, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Take it easy.
Thanks, Tommy. All right, we'll just bring Mitchell back in here for a second and just quickly break down the Forge side of this draw. I believe at this point we're able to bring the bracket up one more time, and we can maybe just remind people, for those that are just joining us, where things stand. Obviously up there again, I don't need to read through every single club again, but the most important ones, obviously, for our purposes: Forge playing Chivas Guadalajara, Cavalry playing Orlando City SC. Opposite sides of the bracket, so who knows? Maybe we have an all CPL Concacaf Champions Cup final.
We're in dreamland. Let's go.
Exactly. But Mitchell, Chivas Guadalajara is a massive, massive club. Just tell me again what goes through your mind when you see Forge's name come out of that pot and placed into that game.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly exciting, isn't it? These are the types of matchups, I think, especially, that make this competition so exciting for Canadian Premier League sides, where you're going up against a side that has 117 years of history. And we're one of the founding members of the Primera División, which obviously became Liga MX as it's known today. A side that's never been relegated in their history. And obviously Canadian soccer fans will be well acquainted with them, considering they famously beat Toronto FC in the 2018 edition of the Champions League. The only time a Canadian, or actually no, Montreal did as well, but the closest, I guess, a Canadian team has come to winning this competition. And that was the last time they've been there, though, which is interesting. And obviously, it hasn't been a club that's been maybe up to that level of late as much, but still, at the same time, this is going to be a massive challenge for Forge. But of any team in the CPL, obviously, they'll be the most prepared for it, considering what they've done in the CONCACAF League, considering, they've gone into the Estadio Azteca. The Estadio Akron won't be the massive leap in terms of, venue and that sort of thing that it would be for maybe some other clubs. So I think this is a really exciting draw for them, and they'll fancy their opportunity to go in and maybe do something in this, as they always do in these matches. So I think it's a really exciting draw. And again, getting kind of that American team for Cavalry, and then getting, a historic Mexican side as well. It's exciting for the league to have this the draw play out the way it did.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, as you mentioned, this is a 117-year-old club who's taking on a Forge FC team that's about to play its 6th season. That's going to be pretty wild just to be in that same competition. Yeah. For those who haven't seen it, Estadio Akron, go take a look at what that stadium looks like. The grass on the outside, it's awesome. It's so cool. So that's going to be quite the entertaining away day for Forge, and I think I'd recommend any fans that want to make that away trip. That would be a pretty fun one. But Chivas, as you mentioned, Mitchell, have had a bit of a weird decade, really. They won that Champions League in 2018. Their last Mexican title was in 2017, though. This year they finished 5th in the Apertura. They lost in the quarterfinals to Monterrey. I think things are a little bit frustrated with obviously one of the arguably the biggest club and best supported club in Mexico, and the best supported Mexican club around the world by a lot of metrics. But Veljko Paunovic is a experienced coach they brought in. He was coach of Reading in England and the Chicago Fire, I believe, more recently in MLS. But it has been a strange, especially last couple of years for Chivas. They went winless in Leagues Cup against MLS teams this year. I think they lost to Cincinnati and Sporting Kansas City. But they have only played a Canadian team in the Concacaf Champions Cup once, and that was that final against TFC. Technically, they haven't lost at home in this competition, but they did lose over 90 minutes to TFC in the second leg of that. Mitchell, just final thought on Forge, who are obviously going back into the competition that they really, really wanted to be into, been in so many continental competitions and flown the Canadian flag so well. Just what do you think? We're going to hear from Bobby Smyrniotis about what it really means to them in a second. But for you, what does it mean to see that club back in a competition like this?
Well, I think it's exciting because we've just seen how this competition has helped shape that club over, their 5 seasons of history, in terms of both what they've done on the field and what they've done off the field as well. And this is an opportunity in going to a club with so much history to, again, absorb everything about the club and everything they've done well to build up this history. And in terms of the player development, you look at the guys who have come out of Guadalajara, in terms of Chicharito, Carlos Vela. There's some really, really top world-class talent that has come out of that system. So I think it's a really exciting opportunity for what has been the class of the CPL in terms of winning these knockout fixtures so far, to go in, obviously be the heavy underdogs, but to really test themselves and extend themselves again at so many levels. And I think getting that opportunity to play against the Cruz Azul side will prepare them in a unique way, and they'll know what to expect, and that makes them just that little bit more dangerous, I think, for Chivas Guadalajara.
Absolutely. Mitch, we'll have you back in one more time at the end of the show to wrap up and maybe just go a little bit deeper on the bracket as a whole. But for now, we are going to bring in our second special guest of the evening, and that would be another champion, in fact, a 4-time champion, Forge FC coach, Bobby Smyrniotis. Bobby, thanks for taking the time this evening. Just the first question is going to be the same one I asked Tommy. What was the first thing that went through your mind when you saw that little Forge ticket come out of the bowl and get placed right next to Guadalajara?
Yeah, it's always a nice thing to see. These are the competitions you want to be part of. These are the competitions that we've created an excellent, short little history for our club, and to be there is what we want. And it's the minimum that we require of our club. And then you get the draw after that, and you say, "Here we go."
Absolutely. I don't think that you would say, but is this one of the ones that you maybe had your eye on in the pod as one that would be a significant club to draw, obviously being such a massive club, being obviously one of the biggest clubs in Mexico, and a real test for you guys?
Yeah, you look at the draws, and you have two thoughts in your head. One is the ultra competitive spirit in you, and seeing how far you can get into it, and then one is the uniqueness of some of the teams that you can play, and Chivas is obviously one of those unique teams, as you guys just mentioned previously. Just the history of who they are, what they represent in Mexican football, and sometimes, for us, the bigger the challenge, the better, and we always look forward to it.
Exactly. Chivas, it's interesting. I feel like obviously being such a historic club in Mexico, but being a club that's so historically been so focused on homegrown players and domestic players, is that something that you admire? I feel like maybe there are similarities between a club like that and something that obviously you guys at Forge, but the Canadian Premier League as a whole maybe has some similarities with, right?
Yeah, obviously they're a club that's known for that in their history and their present, and we're a club that's been built off of players coming through a system from year one, and a lot of those players, if we go back to our year one team, were players that were competing in Concacaf League, the predecessor to this competition, and had a lot of experiences in this. And so obviously, anyone who's in there to develop youth is always good in my books. But in this one, we look forward to, giving this team a hard time coming into Hamilton and Tim Hortons Field, and then going to visit another beautiful stadium down in Mexico.
Absolutely. I know that you guys missed it this year, right? Playing in those CONCACAF competitions. Obviously, it wasn't anything that was on the table this year, but just tell me about, guys, maybe describe what it's like what it was like to be on the touchline at the Azteca, what it was like to go down to Honduras and El Salvador and some of these places, and what makes that so special and something that is such a priority for your club to get to.
Yeah, I think it gives the players a different breadth. It's just a different look at what's going on in football around our continent. And I touched on it in this past season in 2023. We missed it, and we knew that as a club going into it. When you're used to playing some of these outside games, it changes things up a little bit. And sometimes they come early, and sometimes they come later. But that gives a little bit of different motivation to players who have done a lot. Because that's a tricky thing in football when you have players who have accomplished a lot. It's to keep them going, and that's why it was important for us to get back into this competition above everything, because it gives us that extra motivation to start a 2024 season, which will be as challenging as they all are. We set the bar high, obviously, with what we've done as a club, and we need these little components to what we do to keep ourselves going.
Absolutely. I think these games are going to come up on us a little bit quickly once we get into 2024. Bobby, a month and a half ago, you were lifting a trophy after the CPL final. How quickly after that did you have to flip your mind and turn into coach and manager mode again and look towards not just this, but the 2024 season? Yeah,
like with every season, you probably take a few days. You review everything. Then after a couple of weeks, you have to go because before you know it, the New Year's rolled around and we're back into training camp. The great thing is it wasn't our first championship, so the celebrations were celebrations. But we know what's next, and that's sometimes the motto of the club. It's we move on to the next one. This is done, and you go. And what we have in front of us as of right now and today is an opponent. We have a location. We have players we have to look at. Their squad will probably change a little bit as they change from the Apertura to the Clausura, and that provides another difficult component in playing a team from Mexico and Liga MX. They'll probably be 6 to 7 games into competition, and that's a lot different than, let's say, having a MLS-based squad who will start their preseason early January, the same as us. So every opponent brings something different, and this one is an excellent challenge and comes with a lot of history.
Absolutely. And now that we know where you guys are going, what the opponent is, I'm sure the detail-oriented preparation will begin very shortly, I'm sure. Bobby, thank you so much for joining us tonight, taking time out of your evening. I hope you have a fantastic holiday. I'm sure we'll speak to you plenty of times in the new year as we prepare for this. And congratulations again on winning the North Star Cup.
Perfect. Thank you, Charlie.
Thanks, Bobby. All right, Mitchell, come back in one more time, and we will wrap up here and put a bow on the 2024 Concacaf Champions Cup draw. I know that we did have an eye on that 11th game, but Nashville SC and Mocha from the Dominican Republic will be playing for that chance to take on Inter Miami and Lionel Messi in that round of 16. But Mitch, are there any other games in this bracket that are standing out to you? Anything that maybe is of particular interest outside of our CPL games?
Well, let me get my reading glasses on here pretty quick because this is a big tournament that's going on. But I actually think Cavalry's quadrant is quite fascinating. You look at the other Canadian team involved in this competition, Major League Soccer's Vancouver Whitecaps playing against Tigres. I think that's a very interesting matchup. And then the all MLS matchup between Houston and St. Louis. With a chance to play the Columbus Crew, obviously MLS Cup champions. 6 degrees of CPL Mo Farsi included in that as well. Obviously, you have to give a shout out to him, former Cavalry FC player. But I think that whole side of the bracket, obviously with Cavalry going into Orlando, is very intriguing and exciting. So, that's one of the areas I'm really going to be looking for.
I think so. Just a few minutes left here. So if you've got any questions for us, just put them in the chat and we'll try to get to them. Again, also in the chat, check out that link for a chance to enter and win a ticket flex pack to your favorite Canadian Premier League team. That sounds like a thing that you should get in and enter that competition, because that is a lot of fun. But Mitch, this is going to be a wild January for Cavalry and Forge, right? We've already heard quite a lot about Cavalry's squad, and I know that they've got a pretty robust team of returning players coming back. We are still waiting to hear on some things about Forge's squad, but they're Forge. They're usually they're going to be Forge, right? They almost always are. But what are, obviously Bobby and Tommy talked about it, what are some of the challenges you think of coming into preseason in January, playing obviously one of the hardest games you've ever had to play, and then kind of having to look maybe a month or two towards the CPL regular season? Obviously, they won't be off because they're going to win the first round and keep going in this competition. But it's a bit of a weird cadence for these clubs, right?
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, when you look at a number of different things, I mean, it appears, we don't fully know, but appears as though both teams will be bringing back a pretty solid core of the players who were part of the club last year. But obviously, when you're integrating new players as well, you wouldn't have had competitive matchups to get them involved in the squad and to build up that chemistry. So that's one difficulty. Tommy mentioned, the climates are very different. So you're potentially preparing in the winter up here in Canada for games that, will be played in potentially, a 40-degree swing from that, if not more, which is, a challenge that they'll have to overcome. And, just the detail orientation of squads that can change a lot too on both sides. I mean, you're scouting in Orlando City team that could look very different in short order. You're scouting a Chivas team that, as Bobby mentioned, could change as well. So I think there's maybe a lot of moving parts in these kind of things that they have to do that in these preparations that they have to go through. But if you're looking at organizations and coaches who are prepared and as detail oriented as they come, maybe just in this region in general. I think you put Bobby Smyrniotis and Tommy Wheeldon Jr. up there, and not just them, but their coaching staffs between David Edgar, Leon Hapgood. There's a lot of different guys that deserve credit. So I think that as much as these are going to be challenges, there's a lot of these are exciting challenges for them as well. You look at the players, the opportunities they're going to have, but the coaches to really build towards international competition. That's an incredible experience.
Absolutely. For the optimists out there like ourselves, if Forge are able to get past Chivas, and they'll play probably Club América, if they get past Real Esteli, which would be another trip to the Azteca for them. Familiar ground, obviously, but we all know that Club América is also a massive, massive team in Mexico. If Cavalry get past Orlando, they could play Tigres or the Whitecaps. Which I'm sure will actually be pretty interesting. That's actually one of the first round ties that I think I'm most interested in watching as well. I believe that the Whitecaps played Tigres fairly recently in the Champions League.
Sounds right. Yeah.
I think. I don't have my notes on the Whitecaps history at the moment because we couldn't draw them. They were in pot 2. But again, just so many massive, massive clubs in this tournament. I love when CPL teams play CONCACAF. It's always been some of the most fun that we've had at this league covering these teams, and it's been some of the most fun that some of these players have had playing in these games. And obviously, it's a chance for CPL teams to demonstrate the level in Canada, fly the Canadian flag, show how professional these teams can be, how high their level is on the pitch, and welcome some of these teams into our country where maybe they might not have been before. So it's certainly a lot of positives for a tournament like this, and I think we're very, very happy that we do have 2 spots in it this year, which is a lot of fun. Just wrapping up. I mean, for the Inter Miami fans or the Messi fans in here, if you are interested, we've already said, they're probably going to play Nashville in their round of 16. And then after that, they could, it really could be anybody. It could be FC Cincinnati. It could be Monterrey, Comunicaciones, Cavalry from Jamaica. I think you'd probably bank on either Monterrey or Cincinnati there, Cincy being the Supporters Shield winners. But again, not an easy path to the final for Mr. Kamal Miller and co and his friends. But yeah, there's just so much to look at in this bracket. For one, I think just can't wait to get started. I would encourage all of you to stay tuned to campbell.ca and this YouTube channel as we break down this tournament, and in particular Orlando and Chivas, and obviously Cavalry and Forge over the next month and a half as we lead up to these games in early February, as these clubs start to really look ahead to some of those big games. Before we do that build up into these games, though, there is one last order of business for you guys watching, because we have another big day in the Canadian Premier League tomorrow, which is our 2024 CPL U Sports Draft presented by Degree. Again, if you're not aware, this is a very important event at the CPL. Obviously, each club has 8 picks in 2 rounds, so they'll be drafting 2 players each from Canadian universities, from U Sports schools, and it's always been quite a unique pathway to the professional game in Canada, where obviously uniquely U Sports players can play professionally in the Canadian Premier League and don't have to forfeit their academic eligibility or their U Sports eligibility, unlike in the United States, which is a unique part of the U Sports draft. But we've had some great players come through there. We've had Joel Waterman, obviously, Victor Laturi, Anthony White, our first overall pick last year, played for Vancouver, Eric Kobza, who was a major part of Cavalry's CPL Shield winning team, Garvin Matusala, who was a major part of Forge FC's North Star Cup winning team this year. All sorts of players, and I would encourage you guys to tune in at 1 p.m. Eastern on, again, this very same CPL YouTube channel, or OneSoccer's YouTube channel, or the CBC Sports YouTube channel. Really anywhere. It's really hard to miss, and find out who perhaps some of the next stars that come out of the esports draft are. It'll be a lot of fun. So I encourage you all to join us. Mitchell, thank you so much for joining us in front of your gorgeous looking Christmas tree. It looks very, very cozy in your home there. Probably a little bit warmer than here at CPL HQ. But again, for those of you who somehow have missed it, the 2024 Concacaf Champions Cup will kick off in February, and Forge FC of the Canadian Premier League will play Chivas Guadalajara. Cavalry FC of the Canadian Premier League will play Orlando City SC of Major League Soccer. Thank you so much for joining us, and everybody who's watched along with us. Good night.